Good morning. It is Tuesday, January 21st, 2025. Happy birthday to Dwight. You know who you are, and I didn't want to forget you. Okay, let's start off with this. It is 1,600 Russians off the battlefield. And that's not even, well, it's not even a top 23. I had a top 10 list and it grew to top 20, and now I have to 23, which is at 1,630. So it might be in the top 25, but it's almost insane that we're even talking about it like that. But it's high, but it's not even that high. Okay, 12 tanks off the battlefield, 23 armored fighting vehicles, 60 artillery systems, 1 air defense system, and 194 vehicles and fuel tanks. I said that right, 194. So there's a lot going on. Here's Andrew Perpetua's list. Here are the losses that he could identify for January 20th. And when we look at it, it's about 1-to-1, just barely 1-to-1. Somebody was talking about in the comments the other day, why do you do this? Why do you talk about it like that? And well, you need more detail. If you want more detail, go and look at another source like Johnny Pierce at ATP Geopolitics, really get into the nitty gritty of this kind of thing. And other comments were things like, well, you know, a motorcycle is not the same as a tank. That's correct. A motorcycle is not the same as a tank. But if you see lots of motorcycles being destroyed because they're sending people forward on motorcycles, that's an important thing to note. I mean, there's a reason why they're doing that. Okay, but I don't get into that detail. I just give you the broad overview kind of view. Okay, out of 130 Shahed drones launched, 72 shot down, 59 suppressed by electronic warfare. So you don't see anything in the news about, Kyiv apartment buildings and things along those lines today. Okay, drone attack damaged the roof of a workshop in a Smolensk aviation plant overnight, causing a fire. This is Astra's sources. The factory, which produced X-59 missiles used by Russia in Ukraine, is under sanctions, and it did not halt operations, but the Ukrainians halted the operations. The plant is involved in the production of modernization of military aircraft, including Su-25s. It also repairs military aviation equipment. Okay, so that's what we know about that. Now, Anton Gerashenko posted this, and I thought this was worth talking about. So in the last, excuse me, I have bronchitis. It has nothing to do with me talking here. It has everything to do with just being in my classroom. One year, I get it regularly about this time of year. And when I went to the doctor once, I said, was there anything I could have done? I tried to do all these things to prevent it. He said, you got to get out of the sewer, which by that he meant the classroom, which is something I can't do because students are like, here's your paper, and so... Yeah, so please forgive my voice. So Anton Gerashenko posted this. In the second half of 2024, the area of drones hit covered the entire central part of Russia up to the Volga River. Since 2025, drones targeted oil depots in Engels and Voronezh regions several times in a row. Now, since January 4th, there have been 16 hits in 17 days. Let's just review this because it's been like one thing after another, after another, after another. January 4th, drones flew 900 kilometers to Ust-Luga. On January 8th, the drones flew about 1,000 kilometers and hit an oil depot in Engels. On January 10th, fires broke out in Russia's Rostov region due to drone debris. And that's okay. They can say drone debris as long as the fire breaks out. On January 11th, Russian-occupied Crimea and a number of Russian cities were under attack, like Novorossiysk. On January 14th, drones attacked an oil depot in Engels. It also attacked a plant in Kazan, a Saratov oil refinery, Bryansk chemical plant. January 15th, an oil depot started burning in Russia's Voronezh. January 16th, a Tambov gunpowder plant. January 17th, the drones attacked the oil depot at Engels. This was the third attack in 2 weeks, and it had just gone out, and they did it again. On January 18th, drones attacked oil depot in Russia's Tula and Kaluga regions. January 20th, aircraft plant in Kazan. Drones paid a visit to a familiar oil depot in Russia's Voronezh region. And January 21st, today, drones hit military industrial facilities in Russia's city of Smolensk. So what they're doing is they're getting better bang for the buck. I'm not being funny either. I'm saying they are hitting places that are multipliers, or in this case, dividers, because they're preventing the Russians from actually doing some significant damage to them by hitting their oil reserves or their aircraft facilities or things along these lines. And so they're really getting a multiplication effect by doing that. Okay, the ISW continues to assess that the Russian military command was likely willing to accept record levels of casualties in the fall to winter of 2024, especially from September to November 2024, in order to achieve relatively larger territorial gains from continued infantry-led attritional assaults. So that's exactly what they've been doing. If you look at the numbers going up daily, you see that reflected. If you look at the ground on the map, you see that reflected. So they are doing that. It's costing them a fortune in manpower, but they don't seem to care about the manpower that they're losing. Okay, let's look at this. Michael McKay, just to get a sense of where the fighting is heaviest, in the north, in the Kharkiv region, invaders attacked twice. And if you go to Kherson, 4 times. If you go to southern battlefront in Donetsk region, 7 times, and they name a number of different cities here. In the Kupiansk direction, 8 times. Seversk direction, 1 attack, but in Bakhmut front, there were 9 attacks, so a total of 10. In the northwest of temporarily occupied Horlovika, the Ukrainians repelled 13 attacks. In the Liman direction, invaders made 15 attacks. Liman's one to keep an eye on because they're going to keep pushing pressure on Liman, and that's going to happen, especially after Pokrovsk. Whenever they get to an after Pokrovsk kind of scenario, Liman is going to be a next significant focal point. And in Pokrovsk direction, 72 assaults, and it was 60 the other day, and then the day before was 40, and then 2 days before that it was 60 each of those days. They really, really want Pokrovsk. Speaking of Pokrovsk, I know it's somewhat just abstract. This is Pokrovsk. This is what it looks like in the city, where it looked like normal life just a year and a half ago. Okay, Security Service of Ukraine detained the chief psychiatrist of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, who became rich by more than $1 million during the war. Uh-oh, that's bad. According to the Security Service of Ukraine, he is the chief psychiatrist of the Armed Forces, who is the deputy head of the Central Military Qualification Commission and decides on the serviceability of the military. So apparently it looks like he was on the take, and he's being served a notice of suspicion, and he faces up to 10 years in prison for that. That's terrible. That's treasonous. I mean, that's just awful stuff. Okay, now we just got through Trump's inauguration yesterday. Lukashenko, that's the 20th, and Lukashenko on the 29th faces his re-election campaign. The election campaign has been marked by voter intimidation, suppression of independent media, and barring of Democratic candidates. So there are 5 candidates. So of course, Lukashenko is the only one that most people recognize, or the others are pretty minor in comparison. And then you also have a scenario where Lukashenko was talking about, look, outside observers, if they don't want to come, that's fine. That's their business if they don't want to come. He didn't say if they want to come, that's fine, but if they don't want to come. Okay, Lukashenko also said he didn't like Trump's inauguration and called Harris a poor woman. Honestly, I wasn't thrilled with Joe Biden, the previous president, but when I looked at him, he somehow seemed more decent than Trump himself. You shouldn't insult or offend those who came before you. They were there. They did poorly. They corrected their mistakes, and the people will see it and say thank you, said the dictator. He also called Biden a frail old man and poor fellow while expressing sympathy for Kamala Harris. Okay, but he's got his own problems, and he's going to be facing those fairly shortly. Okay. In Russia, hackers reported the break-in of Russian state-owned Rostelecom database, stealing the data of 150,000 users. The hackers group called Silent Crow reported the hacking of the database on Russian state-owned digital service provider Rostelecom. As proof, the hackers published tables of registered users and appeals through a form on the website. Thus, it's quite possible that the leak contains at least 154,000 unique email addresses and more than 100,000 phone numbers. So I don't know exactly what they're going to do with that, but those kind of things create problems. Okay, there was a claim of a Danish F-16 instructor allegedly killed in Russia or by a Russian missile strike in Kryvyi Rih. Okay, it's false. It didn't happen. It's been debunked. It's Kremlin propaganda, and it's just to create a sense that, see, these Europeans are here surreptitiously within Ukraine. This was confirmed by the Center for Countering Disinformation under Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council. Okay, this is the British intelligence update. I talked about something I thought was interesting about the Mediterranean and how things are shifting after Syria. Uncertainty concerning the future of Russia's presence and capability in the eastern Mediterranean remains high. Following the collapse of Assad's regime, Russia's former Syrian ally, Russia's permanent Mediterranean task group, does not currently have access to its Tartus naval base for maintenance and logistical support. There's no comparable alternative base in the region. Now, they may go to Libya, but that's still not going to be quite the same. The future of Russia's bases in Syria remains unclear, while the political uncertainty in the country. There's political uncertainty in the country. However, Russia is almost certainly seeking to retain a presence in the Mediterranean. Its ability to logistically support both its military and its private military contractors in Africa, as well as limiting the reputational damage incurred through the fall of the Assad regime, will almost certainly be priorities for the Russian government. Russia's intent to redeploy any forces or equipment to potential alternative locations in North Africa remains unclear. So we don't know exactly what's going to happen or where or when, but there's an alternative, and I'll talk about that in a moment. The Russian leadership almost certainly considers Ukraine conflict to be their primary concern. Russia's prioritization of the Ukraine conflict likely degraded Russia's ability and capacity to keep the Assad regime in power. So the Syrians are grateful because they wanted the Russians out, and the war in Ukraine has actually caused or contributed to them not being able to prop up the Assad regime. So that's interesting. Now, the alternative is this, and Alexander Dugin talked about it. I talked about it in my 3 big stories yesterday about a longitudinal corridor between Russia and Iran. So instead of worrying about the Black Sea and the Mediterranean, instead of worrying about what's going on over here, a corridor between Russia and Iran through the Caspian Sea, and then maybe some kind of naval base down here somewhere will allow Russia to project power down into the Arabian Sea and into the Indian Ocean. And if you have some kind of bases over here in Iran, then you can project your force down into Africa. That might be the alternative as well. Okay, just a couple last things. Here's Darth Putin. Actually, we didn't invade Finland. Finland invaded itself with a genuine false flag, leading USSR, whose army was accidentally massed and ready to attack, only fight after being asked by new legitimate government, because we prefer that pact with Hitler. Sound roughly familiar? Well, what's he talking about? He's talking about this. On this day in 1932, the Soviet Union signed a non-aggression pact with Finland. We preferred one with the Nazis and had a secret clause because 7 years later we invaded Finland. Okay, so this is the way they kind of roll. And if you want more evidence of that, on this day in 2021, European Court of Human Rights found that Russia was guilty of ethnic cleansing of Georgian civilians in 2008, war and widespread deliberate killing of civilians, burning, evictions, and crimes against humanity. And people want to appease me. For some reason, they seem to. Well, not everyone. This is the defense of Ukraine putting this out. Our plans for today are to drink some coffee and destroy the occupiers. So go to work. All right, my friends, that's all that I have. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.